In this movie, we're going to take an introductory look at curves. Now, curves inside of Maya are used for a lot of different things. They're very important to us because they're so well integrated into many of the different systems and workflows we become accustomed to. For instance, we have a curve that is being set up as a hair curve. When I hit play, we'll see that that curve falls down because it's being affected by gravity. Now, what's cool is that we can take that curve with all of its simulation on it and its animation and then apply stuff to it. So we can make it look like a strand of hair, or we could even attach a row of trees along that curve. Now, we also use curves to model certain objects. For instance, I have four curves lined up here, and what I can do with them is perform what's called a loft. So I can select all four of these curves, go to Surfaces, and just choose Loft. I'm going to hit 5 on the keyboard, or we'll just go up here and choose Smooth Shade All. That shows me the surface that I just created by using four curves that I drew out. So it's very easy to use our curves to generate a more complex surface. Kind of an alternative to starting with primitive objects, we can draw out curves and then generate a surface from them. And let's just delete that. We can also use curves as a guide. For instance, I have a sphere and a curve here, and I could take this sphere and actually snap it along this curve. We can do so by choosing the Snap to Curves icon here. Make sure we have the proper axis, all three axes, and I'll middle mouse on there, and I can drag it, and you can see that it snaps directly to that curve. That just allows me to place my objects a little bit easier. Another instance of how we can use curves is by projecting curves onto a surface. Of course, once it's projected onto the surface, then we can go back and utilize our other options. For instance, now that the curve is on the surface, we can then add trees to it. Or we can take other objects and snap along that curve. If I go here and we'll just select my curve and then the surface itself, I'll go to Surfaces and choose Project Curve onto Surface. And it projected it and it used the actual viewport angle. Undo that just so you can see a difference here. And we'll open up the options and see how we have active view here. We'll go ahead and let's switch to a front view so that it will project it perfectly onto that surface. And we'll hit project. Switching back to perspective, I can now see that that curve has been projected onto the surface. And there is a history that sticks with it. So if I move that curve, my projected curve will move with it. So we can get very inventive when we're dealing with curves. Let's just clear that out and see how we generate these curves to begin with. Now we have two different types of curves. Now I'm in the modeling menu set and we have my drop down menu here of curves. I'm going to click that and we'll dock this, although we're really not going to use this menu too much here. But just so that you can see, these are all the different types of tools and different things that we can do with our curves. But when it comes to actually creating the curve, these are located under the Create menu. I'll click Create, Curve Tools, and here's all of the different types of curves that I have to choose from. So I'm going to dock that as well, and we'll just pull that out over there. Now, the two main ones that I typically use are the CV curve tool and the EP curve tool. Now, as we've kind of seen a growing trend inside of Maya, we have these multiple menus that kind of result in the same end object. This is also true for the CV and EP curve tool. Regardless of which one you choose here, you're ending up with the same type of curve. And I'll show you why here. So if I choose CV curve tool, so here we have our icon, our last tool used. I'm going to double click this just so that I can bring up the tool settings menu. And I'm just going to go into my viewport and just click. And this is going to drop points down on the grid. And I'll left click and continue to draw out points. When I'm done, I can just hit enter. So that's my CV curve tool. If I go to the EP curve tool, notice it looks pretty much identical to what we were just at, and I'll start dropping points. Notice though that instead of dots, I now get X's, and we'll just drop a couple of X's, hit enter. All right, let's close this just for some more screen real estate there. Now I drew these obviously differently, but if I select them both and go into a component mode, and I'm going to choose F8 just to get to my vertex components or my control vertices, I can still see the same control points. So no real difference between them other than the shape, of course. But let's discuss here the difference from a control vertice and an EP or edit point. So these are control points or control vertices, CV. So that's our CV curve tool, which was this guy right here that we drew out. But we have the same control vertices when I drew an EP curve. If I right click on the object, I get my specific marking menu for the type of object that I have. And if I go to edit point, now look, it converts my selection to EPs or edit points. These X's are actually located on the object itself. We can grab these and move these around in order to shape our object basically the same way that we started when we created our EP curve. We just drop those X's and it generates it. So what's the difference? Well, the main thing that happens here is that an EP curve are points located directly on the curve itself. So notice when I move this here, that X never leaves. None of those X's do. When I'm manipulating edit points, they're much tighter transitions between each point. So it's a little bit more accurate, you could say, but the problem is they can be a little bit unruly. I'm just going to hit enter there. We'll go to a CV curve and we'll just drop a couple here to get it rolling. Kind of the same difference here, but notice what's happening back along the curve. They're way away from those points, and there's a different interpolation. So that control vertice has a much stronger interpolation between the individual points. Now, I prefer to use control vertices in order to generate my curves. I just find it a little bit easier to control. Let's just scrap all of that. Now, we also have the Bezier curve tool. If you're coming from a different program, this might be a little bit more comfortable. When I click on this, and if I hold the left mouse button, it allows me to pull out a handle for shaping my curve. To complete it, we can just hit enter. The Bezier curve allows us a little bit finer control. As you can see here, we can have hard points as well as curvature all under the same curve. Ultimately, however, Bezier curves need to be converted over to the NURBS curve, which is the CV or EP curve type. Then we have the pencil curve tool, which allows us to draw a curve out. Now, this may seem really easy, but the problem is if we hit F8, the number of points is not controlled by us, it is interpreted by Maya. So we really don't know what we're going to get when we use that pencil curve tool. And then we also have the 3-point circular arc and the 2-point circular arc, which simply allow us, as the name describes here, the ability to create an arc by dropping down a couple of points. We can go back and manipulate this by middle mousing on any one of these blue boxes to change the shape of that curve or of that arc that we've just created. Ultimately, it is a NURBS curve with control points and edit points that we can come in and move around.